Today, we are opening up a remarkable set of sources detailing a life lived precisely at the fracture point of the 20th century.
Hmm.
We're going to be plunging into the world of Audrey Driscoll. She's a woman of immense wealth, rigid obligation, living in 1930s San Francisco.
And it's this story of how she ultimately trades that high society duty for a life of, incredible geopolitical risk, moral confrontation, and this just explosive wanderlust.
It really is an incredible story of metamorphosis, isn't it?
It is. What we see at the beginning is a life that's just meticulously engineered for comfort and, for propriety.
The ultimate gilded cage.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Our source documents present Audrey as this figure of just completely suppressed energy. She's moving through a life structured by her obligations, not by her own desires.
And the sensory details in the source, they immediately set that tone.
Well, they do.
She's in the San Francisco mansion. It's quiet, it's luxurious, and the only sound is and I'm quoting here, the whisper of her pink satin dressing gown.
It sounds beautiful, but it also sounds like a mausoleum, doesn't it?
Totally. That silence is only broken when she commands the world outside. Not with a shout, but with this tiny movement to press a Arabian jade bell push.
And that bell push, that small, almost absurdly luxurious detail, it just signals the kind of world she controls or thinks she controls.
Right. Everything is starched, everything is scheduled, and it's all perfect.
And the maid is bracing for confrontation.
Yeah.
Because Audrey's perfectionism is, it's a sign of her inner agitation.
She's performing.
She is performing the role of the ideal 1930s society woman running her gruff 80-year-old grandfather's house, but her brain is just running leagues ahead of her actual duties.
We see that cognitive dissonance immediately in her relationship with her grandfather, Edward Driscoll.
Yes.
Edward represents this ultimate institutional resistance to change. He expects her to run the house, but the source reveals he takes a genuine delight in her sharp intellect.
Absolutely. The intellectual sparring is the only release valve she has. From the age of, 12 or 13, she started reading his newspaper.
Not just for herself, but to have leverage in their debates.
Exactly. They argued about everything. World politics to local news, even to stories about dinner parties. Every subject was treated with the same rigorous logic.
It's fascinating that their intellectual relationship was established so early. The source notes their first major row was on her 13th birthday.
And it was so fierce, she didn't speak to him for a week.
That's a teenager exhibiting real political rigor.
And Edward was privately proud, but the paradox remains. He was proud of her mind, while at the same time demanding she confine that brain power to coordinating the cook and the linen.
That is the central tension of this whole story, this incredible capacity for geopolitical analysis stuck administering a domestic empire.
And our mission today is to trace how the accelerating chaos of the 1930s, the Depression, the rise of fascism, finally gave her the friction she needed to break free from that precise pink satin cage and fulfill that intrinsic wanderlust.
So let's start with the true weight of her duty. This wasn't just, decorative hosting. Audrey was effectively the CEO of the Driscoll estate.
She really was. And we need to get into why she was shouldering this immense responsibility.
Right, for such a wealthy family.
Well, the source material makes it clear she inherited the role out of necessity after her parents died. And crucially, her younger sister, Annabelle, or Annie, she refused to learn any of it.
Annabelle just assumed everything would be taken care of for her.
She believed her fiancé, Harcourt Westerbrook, would handle everything, leaving Audrey to shoulder the burden of Edward's stability and, the household's operational excellence.
So Audrey's role becomes incredibly complex. She's running the house, she's serving as the patriarch's intellectual equal, but she's still constrained by this social requirement that she remain at home.
Right, to facilitate her grandfather's comfort and her sister's marriage.
And Edward Driscoll, her grandfather, he just embodies the contradictions of the elite in 1932.
He's proud of her intelligence, of their ferocious daily arguments, but he was simultaneously terrified of her deviating from that conventional path.
He just wanted her married and settled.
Mirroring the accepted life for a woman of her standing.
What's truly remarkable, though, is how insulated their wealth made them from the reality that was just ripping the country apart.
The source states it explicitly. The Depression had not touched them.
And that financial insulation created this massive psychological and political chasm between Edward and Audrey.
This chasm became the battleground for their arguments. Edward was a staunch, an irate defender of the status quo.
Which meant defending Herbert Hoover.
Absolutely. Audrey, though, had completely defected to the Democrats. She was an aggressive supporter of Franklin Roosevelt leading into the 1932 election.
And she didn't just have emotional arguments, she was wielding facts. This is that intellectual rigor we talked about earlier.
She was absolutely precise, and she used these figures as a kind of moral cudgel.
What specific data was she using to confront him?
She pointed out that the average weekly wage had plummeted from $28 down to $17.
That's nearly a 40% drop.
It's a staggering drop in income for the average worker. And beyond the numbers, she cited the human cost. 5,000 banks had failed. 80,000 businesses went bust.
And she mentioned the starvation and suicide.
Yes, she brought up the widespread starvation and suicide across the country.
That's powerful. Her outrage wasn't just intellectual, it was moral. She wasn't arguing about, Keynesian theory.
No, she was arguing about human suffering, something Edward, in his insulated bubble, simply refused to acknowledge because it meant admitting the failure of his entire political class.
So when FDR won that election in a landslide, taking 60% of the vote, it resulted in a rousing row that lasted for hours.
For Audrey, those debates were perhaps the only way she could truly use her magnificent mind. It was her only outlet for real engagement in the world.
And yet, parallel to this rigorous political debate, the House was just consumed by the most conventional social event possible, Annabelle's wedding.
The details are almost suffocatingly traditional, aren't they?
They are. The source lists them so meticulously to show the sheer scale of the domestic duty.
The Jay Green gown, the antique French lace encrusted with tiny pearls, the French tulle veil.
And 7 bridesmaids.
And all the while, Annabelle is focused solely on her own beauty, avoiding any kind of conflict, and, critically, learning nothing about the reality of running a life or a household.
And Audrey had already decided that Annabelle's fiancé, Harcourt Westabrook, was only suitable for Annabelle, not for her.
Yes, she willingly relinquished him. She recognized he would never have fed the hunger in Audrey's soul.
Which tells us Audrey had already identified that her needs were fundamentally different. She was seeking sustenance, not just security.
That distinction becomes violently clear after the wedding. We fast forward a bit to this terrifying scene in the nursery of Annabelle and Harcourt's new home.
Audrey visits, and Harcourt, who's had way too much to drink, makes this clumsy, aggressive pass at her.
Right across the crib of his newborn son. The setting just makes the boorishness even more shocking.
And the source material details her response perfectly. She doesn't panic.
Not at all. She confronts him with complete control, threatening him with social and domestic ruin. She says, "If you do, I'll have your wife and your son back in my house so fast your head will spin."
She uses her social and financial power like a weapon.
But then Harcourt retaliates. And this is where the confrontation becomes just devastatingly personal for Audrey.
He throws the accusation back at her.
He blames Audrey for Annabelle's emotional and practical helplessness, arguing, "You did everything for her. Everything. She can't even blow her nose by herself."
He's basically accusing Audrey of creating the spoiled and selfish woman he now resents by treating Annabelle like a perpetual child.
And how does Audrey process that? She internally admits the painful truth of it. She recognizes that she had enabled Annabelle, rationalizing it as caring for the poor, helpless little thing.
So the confrontation just confirms her fundamental realization. She has wasted her immense talents, not just running Edward's life, but actively enabling Annabelle's decline.
And in doing so, preventing herself from living. The psychological cost of that realization is immense.
It solidifies her internal life, where she seeks satisfaction only in the remnants of her father's world. The photographs he took, the tattered albums.
Her father, Roland, had adventure in his soul.
And she finally knows, with absolute certainty, that she is not cut out for the life destined for the women of her times. The cage is no longer a protective structure, it's a life sentence.
That realization that she is wasting her life leads directly to the decision to leave in 1933.
And the source details this brief, painful conversation where she tells Edward she's going to Europe for just a few months.
Her grandfather's reaction is just visceral. He connects her departure directly to the original, profound loss of his son, Roland.
For a moment, Audrey believes her words will literally kill him.
He accuses her, asking if duty or obligation would ever bring her back.
It's emotional manipulation, really.
It is, but despite his bitterness, he ultimately lets her go. The source suggests he recognized something in her, that she was too much like Roland, and that she had to pursue this internal drive.
He knew he couldn't confine her anymore.
Her journey then begins immediately with this symbolic act of defiance on the Broadway Limited train heading east.
Edward insists she stay protected in her compartment, worrying about the trash she might encounter.
But Audrey instantly rebels. She ignores him and heads straight for the lounge car. She dines with strangers, accepting the risk of encountering people outside her carefully vetted social circle.
She's testing the boundaries of her new freedom.
And she's enjoying the sheer novelty of it, even declining an invitation from a respectable attorney, just because she could.
The journey to New York is where her true calling immediately asserts itself. Photography. Her real genius, as the source calls it, shines through the lens.
Yes, and what's she drawn to capturing?
Movement and life. Everything outside the staid world she knew. She captured skyscrapers and passersby, catching odd angles, funny hats, and the expressions on faces.
So she's using the camera to dissect the human condition, to transform passive observation into active documentation.
In New York, she goes on a photography binge. 6 full rolls of film. Harlem, Central Park, Wall Street, St. Patrick's.
And she immediately contrasts New York with her home, describing it as bigger and brighter and more exciting.
It instantly makes San Francisco feel sleepy, staid, and sedate. The escape is just exhilarating.
Then the transatlantic crossing introduces the next crucial layer of her education, the international elite.
She meets Lady Violet, a Marchioness by birth, and Lord James Hawthorne. They are the epitome of the leisure class.
They're leading this indolent life of luxury between London and Cap Antibes.
This is a critical pivot point, isn't it? She's moving from the moneyed elite of San Francisco, who are still sort of grounded in industry, to this international bohemian aristocratic class who have completely detached from convention.
And the Hawthornes are surprisingly grounded, given their pedigree. They're 6 years married, with 2 children, and they're described as marvelous and great fun, not tiresome or snobbish.
They instantly embrace her and show her the true extent of aristocratic luxury and freedom.
And they immediately upgrade her entire experience. They insist she switch from the Connaught to Claridge's in London.
Because James preferred it, promising her treatment the likes of which she'd never experienced.
And the imagery is just wonderful. Rivers of champagne, impeccable chocolates, afternoon shopping carried out on their Rolls Royce. This is effortless luxury.
Paris, by comparison, feels almost dull without them, even though she does the required high-fashion shopping.
She buys 2 hats, one for herself, and significantly, one for Annabelle.
Still performing that residual duty.
She notices the rising trend of the jungle motif, picking up a wild zebra-skin evening gown. It's like a physical manifestation of her own internal wildness starting to assert itself.
But the true immersion, the golden summer, happens in Cap Antibes. This is where she plunges into the bohemian elite of the Jazz Age remnants.
And you have to look at who she was sharing time with.
She was literally mingling with the great minds of the era, partying with Gerald and Cyril. Murphy Sarah famously wore her pearls on the beach.
Seeing Picasso in his eternal black hat, glimpsing F. Scott Fitzgerald and Ernest Hemingway.
And she recognized the historical significance of this moment, describing them as the sculptors of a magical time in history. It wasn't just a party, it was an education in a world free from the puritanical constraints of San Francisco.
And in Violet, she found a true spiritual sister, the sister she never had before.
But despite all the luxury, the core of Audrey's desire remains focused on the exotic, on the Far East.
She dreams of India, Japan, China. The source says she sees the world as a giant apple that she wanted to bite and bite and bite until she devoured the whole thing right to the core, seeds and all.
She has only just started the journey. So this internal hunger for the world finds its focus in the person of Charles Parker Scott, the famous travel writer and explorer.
She meets him at Antibes. And what was surprising about him?
Audrey, having read his accounts of Himalayan expeditions, had assumed he was much older, maybe a grizzled, middle-aged figure.
Instead, he was a handsome young man, radiating the very rootlessness that she craved.
And his core identity perfectly mirrors the wild she seeks. He claims that adventuring is in my blood, that he was born to live in the wild.
You see settling down as like putting a lion in a cage.
Which, of course, resonates so deeply with Audrey's own recent realization about her life in San Francisco.
And what gives his philosophy depth is his tragic backstory. The source reveals that the death of his younger brother, Sean, drove him to Nepal when he was just 21.
And that trauma instilled this deep fear of loss,
which he mitigated by refusing attachment, leading him to doubt he would ever want children. He views this rootless existence as being safer somehow like this.
So his wanderlust is rooted in trauma and a fear of profound emotional pain.
While Audrey's is rooted in suppressed intellectual capacity and a need for moral engagement. That contrast forms the core of their intense connection.
They immediately discuss the constraints on her life. Her grandfather I love, her sister who needs me desperately.
And Charles insists she cannot live by other people's lives. This is a direct challenge to the duties she had lived by for over a decade.
And he validates her true talent. He praises her photography, telling her it's damn good and perhaps even better than what I write.
For Audrey, who has been running a household and arguing politics with an old man, this validation of her creative output is just immense.
She's truly seen for the first time.
The chemistry is instantaneous. It's a dynamic exchange, fueled by their shared intensity and his rootless freedom clashing with her deep-seated obligations.
This tension then culminates in the invitation, which functions as the first implied proposal.
Charles invites her to join him immediately on his trip to China, but he downplays it.
Right. Will you come with me? He says. Her heart stopped, just as far as Istanbul.
Her heart stops because for the first time, she sees the possibility of living her dream, but it requires an immediate total severing of her past.
And her initial response is a whispered refusal. The source explains her fear. She was afraid of throwing convention to the winds, knowing exactly what being alone with him in Venice would lead to.
It felt, and I quote, like throwing herself off a cliff.
The fear isn't of him, it's of choosing herself.
But Charles pushes back, using his own trauma, emphasizing that life is short and infinitely precious. He explains his destination, China, where he's going to interview Chiang Kai-shek and write about Shanghai.
Which is already under threat by the Japanese military.
And that geopolitical reality suddenly makes her fear of missing him outweigh her fear of convention. The thought of him being killed before she sees him again is just horrifying.
So they reach a compromise. She agrees to meet him in Venice on September 1st.
And they make a pact to keep it secret from V and James. This reckless choice, this decision to prioritize a potential passionate relationship over immediate obligation, marks the official start of her journey away from San Francisco.
She knows she would regret missing him forever.
Audrey's solo drive through Italy becomes this true psychological journey, a forced reckoning with her choice.
She drives through San Remo, Rome, and Florence, but she's mentally absent. She feels like a lost soul, totally numb to the beauty around her.
The source material captures this anxiety so beautifully. She's no longer enjoying the travel. She is fixated only on the destination.
Which is Charles.
Exactly. The historical landmarks, the Colosseum, the catacombs, they're just scenery as she races toward September 1st.
And the panic just peaks on the train ride to Venice. It's hours late.
She realizes the sheer insanity of their plan. Meeting in the Piazza San Marco, a public square where they could so easily miss each other.
She arrives after sunset and suffers the heartbreak of defeat, fighting back tears after mistaking someone else for him.
So she finally retreats, settling into her suite at the gritty palace, feeling utterly bereft. The romantic recklessness has just collided with bureaucratic reality, and she feels like she's lost.
But Charles finds her.
He knocks on the door a second time. She had left it unlocked, and he walks in, revealing he wouldn't have left for Istanbul without seeing you.
He chose her presence over his deadline. That's huge. It shows a flexibility that suggests he is willing to bend his rootless rules for her.
And the reunion is immediate and total. She just declares, "I love you so much," rejecting any lingering conventions.
They make love, and she realizes that from this day forth, she was his. She has chosen passion and self-fulfillment over propriety.
Charles confirms their trajectory, though a bit ruefully. "I never want to be without you again, like the rest of my life."
The second unsaid proposal.
Yes. And they both know the impossible cost, her family or his career, but they agree to just enjoy what we have for the moment, accepting the risk.
And she then makes the full commitment. She agrees to join him, at least as far as Istanbul, and perhaps beyond.
She knew she couldn't imagine a life without him anymore. The great escape has been solidified by love.
But their romantic bubble is shattered during their trip on the Orient Express toward Istanbul.
At a stop, in a location implied to be somewhere in Nazi-controlled territory, Germany or Austria, they witness this horrific incident that brings the geopolitical threat right into their luxurious compartment.
What exactly did they witness? Because this incident is such a critical moment in Audrey's moral awakening.
Two men in uniform seize a smaller, older man by the throat. They take his passport, and they lead him away.
And his wife screams out the single chilling word, "Juden."
Juden! and the man's luggage is just violently pulled off the train. This is the rising tide of fascism made immediate and personal.
Audrey is anguished and shocked, but Charles, the survivalist, he tries to minimize the atrocity.
He argues they are helpless and that he cannot jeopardize Audrey by intervening. He points to the overwhelming power of Hitler's men.
This creates this profound, defining tension between them.
Audrey, the former political debater, armed with depression statistics, she refuses to accept passivity. She glares at him, asking if he would just stand by if it were James and Violet being taken away.
She pushes the moral argument to the breaking point. She's essentially asking if his moral compass only extends to those he personally loves.
And Charles, furious at the implication, admits that yes, he would risk intervention for James, which just confirms the moral inconsistency.
His fear for Audrey wins out, but the incident haunts them both.
It introduces the ominous reality of the 1930s collapse into their private world and plants the seed of Audrey's future moral duty, a duty that supersedes even Charles's survivalist instincts.
Despite the fear and that moral conflict, Audrey continues with Charles. She recognizes she couldn't imagine a life without you anymore.
She has fully traded domestic obligation for passion and geopolitical proximity.
And the journey is immense, over 5,000 miles into China, traveling through Nanking, Shanghai, and Peking.
It's a rough, scrutinized journey on these ancient trains. For Audrey, her old San Francisco life is just a blur. This adventure is the only thing that holds reality.
And Charles provides the necessary geopolitical backdrop. He explains the strained alliance between Chiang Kai-shek,
Whom he interviews and finds ruthless but charming.
and Mao Zedong. And that alliance was forced by the external Japanese threat, which had already attacked Shanghai in 1932.
He describes Shanghai itself as the most cosmopolitan city, a city of extremes, simultaneously magnificent and decadent.
Teeming with colonial types. British, French, Russian, Japanese, who desperately try to pretend that they're not here.
Just trying to maintain their detachment from the chaos.
And it's in Shanghai that Audrey's past catches up to her. They have a disastrous run-in with Muriel Brown, the exact society gossip she hoped to avoid.
Muriel immediately suspects they are shacking up, having seen them entering their room together.
And Audrey panics, thinking about the inevitable gossip reaching her grandfather. She tries desperately to create a cover story.
She mentions Charles's important interview with Chiang Kai-shek to try to throw her off the scent.
But Muriel's not fooled. Audrey knows that loose and vicious tidbit is heading straight back to San Francisco.
And despite the deadlines Charles is facing for his contract, Audrey insists on a detour, a pilgrimage, to Harbin in Manchuria.
Simply because her deceased father, Roland, had been there.
Charles worries about the severe conditions, the freezing cold, the snow, and their lack of suitable equipment. He calls the trip not sensible.
But Harbin is deep into the wild. It's a mix of Russian and Manchurian influences, reached via the Chinese Eastern Railway, which was under Japanese control.
They arrive at a Catholic orphanage run by the nuns of St. Michael, and that's where the adventure stops and the true duty begins.
They find the orphanage in utter crisis. The nuns have been murdered by bandits.
And Audrey and Charles are left alone with 21 orphans, including the older girls, Ling Wei and Xin Yu.
Charles, the man whose primary duty is his career and his avoidance of attachment, is desperate to leave. He cites his contract, his 3 deadlines.
But Audrey instantly redefines her duty. She tells him, "We are not fooling around. We are taking care of these children."
They send a cable in French to the mother house in Lyon, and the devastating reply confirms their fate.
Aucune possibilité de secours avant fin November. No possibility of help before the end of November.
This forces them to stay through the brutal, frigid Manchurian winter.
And the conditions were just extreme. The cold was crushing. They lacked basic medicine.
The source details the tragedy of Shiha and 4 other children dying of suspected croup.
Croup, which is a manageable illness with proper moisture and steam, becomes a death sentence because they can't provide adequate heat or humidification in that freezing environment.
And it is in December that Ling Hui shares her terrible secret.
She's pregnant by a Japanese soldier and due in February or March.
This adds another layer of profound vulnerability and moral obligation to Audrey's commitment.
And then the situation complicates again with the arrival of General Chang, a provincial general, wounded, dressed in Mongolian costume, seeking refuge in the meat cellar with his men.
Audrey confronts him at gunpoint.
But what's remarkable is the immediate trust they place in him, despite his status as a warlord.
He gives his word that he is a man of honor, and he proves it.
When Ling Hui goes into a difficult, life-threatening labor, Chang, the provincial general and soldier, acts as midwife and surgeon.
The source notes that he performs a life-saving cut using a clean sword, a fascinating detail, to help deliver the baby girl, Mai Lei.
Tragically, Ling Wei dies shortly after the birth from massive blood loss.
But before he leaves, General Chang issues an imperative to Audrey, completely redefining her duty once more.
He instructs her, referring to the half-Japanese child. "Save her, mademoiselle. When you go, take her with you." He emphasizes that in China, a child of mixed heritage, especially one conceived during occupation, might be killed.
It's not a request, it's a non-negotiable moral command. Audrey's duty shifts from coordinating a household to saving a specific, vulnerable life from geopolitical violence. The moment the nuns finally arrive in March of 1934, Charles is forced to leave. He is desperate, knowing his professional success, new books, invitations to India, Egypt, is all meaningless without Audrey.
The source material is so clear about his emotional state. It says he felt someone had torn a limb from his body.
His trauma-induced rootlessness has just collided with profound love, and he is suffering the painful consequences of attachment.
And in his tormented state, he even develops a secret resentment for Annabelle, feeling she took terrible advantage of Audrey.
While Charles departs to fulfill his contract, Audrey makes the painful decision to return to her grandfather, prioritizing the frail old man over Charles.
Charles tries to stop her. He sends a frantic marriage proposal by telegram.
Have serious proposal to discuss with you. Will you marry next morning? Me? I love you.
Huh? But Audrey sends a kind but blunt cable back, declining to meet him in London. The sense of obligation to Edward still outweighs the pull of passion.
So the scene at the Embarcadero when she finally arrives is explosive, exactly as she feared it would be.
Edward Driscoll, looking fiercely, is initially relieved she's back, until he sees Mai Lai strapped gently against her chest.
His outrage is instant and total. He fears Mai Lai is Audrey's illegitimate child, calling her a disgrace.
And the gossip from Muriel Brown has obviously arrived ahead of her. Edward confirms that Muriel's rubbish about murdered nuns and abandoned orphans was indeed true.
So he's linking the shame of the orphans to the perceived shame of Audrey.
But Audrey manages to break through that fury. She uses the same powerful moral arguments she used against him during the Depression debates.
She calmly explains the geopolitical reality, the threat to Mai Li's life in China. She makes it clear this is a matter of life and death, not just social propriety.
And this is the moment the moral framework she developed in China replaces the social framework of San Francisco. And it works. The moral argument breaks through his rigid societal constraints.
He accepts the child, and while he struggles with the name Mai Li, calling her Molly, the acceptance is confirmed later by a tangible act.
He leaves a specific bequest to my great-granddaughter Molly Driscoll in his will. He grants her full legitimacy within the family structure.
However, Audrey struggles immensely to reintegrate into San Francisco. She feels like a total stranger.
She explicitly notes the perverse reality of it all. Life was simpler in China, where she was worrying about bandits and floods, than it is here, where she faces prejudice and selfishness over a baby she saved.
She recognizes that the real dangers are often societal, not just physical.
And the wider world continues to crumble. She returns just in time for news of the Nazi blood purge in June 1934.
Then Hindenburg's death. Hitler becoming Der Führer in August. The ominous shadow they glimpsed on the Orient Express is now a massive, threatening cloud over Europe.
And meanwhile, Annabelle's conventional life, the life Audrey sacrificed her own freedom to maintain, just implodes.
Her marriage to Harcourt falls apart, marked by drunken rages, throwing lamps and pieces of jade.
Annabelle descends into being a spoiled, unpleasant girl.
Yeah.
Drinking heavily and whoring around L.A.
This breakdown is so critical because it forces the final necessary break in Audrey's sense of duty.
When Audrey confronts her, Annabelle turns on her with this venomous cruelty, calling Audrey a jealous bitch for never having a husband.
And that selfish, ungrateful lashing out is the moment Audrey finally realizes her duty is exhausted. She had given her half her life and there was nothing left to give her. The emotional blackmail is finally over. While Audrey was navigating that domestic collapse, Charles, convinced he needed a conventional life and children, and maybe nursing a broken heart.
He moved on. He married Charlotte Beardsley, the publisher's daughter.
Charlotte was ambitious and available. She explicitly viewed Charles as a suitable husband and was determined to turn him into a factory for books and films.
He chose practicality over passion, believing he needed a predictable life.
But Violet Hawthorne, who had witnessed Charles's real connection with Audrey, sees right through the arrangement.
Violet describes Charlotte as cold as ice, noting that Charles looked only half alive at the wedding.
She predicted that Charlotte would successfully contain Charles, turning him into a commercial commodity rather than an explorer.
And Audrey receives the final piece of her freedom in June 1935 with the death of Edward Driscoll. After handling the funeral and securing Molly's bequest, she immediately leaves for Europe with May Lai.
The constraints are finally gone.
And the inevitable awkward reunion occurs in Antibes. She runs into James and Vi, who confirm the painful truth. Charles is not happy.
Charles eventually confronts Audrey privately, and he confirms the shallow nature of his rebound marriage. He reveals the crude truth. I wouldn't have married her. The bitch is, she got pregnant when we were in Egypt.
Charlotte had refused an abortion, essentially forcing him into the marriage.
But before they can fully resolve that romantic complication, the geopolitical nightmare resurfaces, and it brings a defining tragedy.
Audrey is traveling in Germany with her friends, Uschi and Karl Rosen, a Jewish university professor. In Rosenheim in 1935, they witness a direct Nazi atrocity.
Karl Rosen is arrested, and the pretext for his arrest is it's horrifying.
The charge was intercourse with an Aryan, punishable by death under the new Nuremberg laws. Karl, a published, respected academic, was powerless. His wife, Uschi, became hysterical.
This is the moment where the incident on the Orient Express goes from a distant, minimized threat to a profound, immediate reality.
Karl is taken away and murdered by Hitler's men. This trauma confirms everything Audrey feared about the rising political darkness.
Uschi is utterly devastated. She eventually becomes a cloistered nun, unable to cope with the loss.
And the source notes that Karl's death served a unique purpose for Audrey and Charles.
It confirmed the absolute preciousness of their bond in a world that was rapidly consuming itself.
The futility of convention, of duty, of caution was made painfully clear by Karl's senseless murder. They realized how foolish it was to let a misguided sense of propriety or a forced marriage keep them apart.
So by 1937, they established this unique stability in London. They lived together, despite Charles still being legally married to Charlotte, who refuses to grant a divorce.
And Audrey finally achieves professional fulfillment. She develops her photography, has a successful gallery show.
And Charles insists she becomes his official photographer, integrating her talent into his career. They are finally a professional and personal unit.
All against the backdrop of escalating European conflict. They track the wartime horrors. Buchenwald, the Yellow Stars, exclusion from public places.
And when Japan attacks China in 1937, killing 200,000 in Nanking, Audrey feels this huge sense of moral relief.
That event vindicates her radical decision in Harbin. Her duty to save Miley was not a whimsical indulgence. It was a matter of life and death.
Personal loss strikes again in 1940. Audrey suffers a miscarriage of Charles's child during an air raid. Violet supports her, keeping the secret from Charles, who's away working.
But the marital deadlock finally breaks in 1941 when Charles is sent to Cairo as a war correspondent.
And Audrey, refusing to sit out the war, registers as a photojournalist and follows him. She refuses to be left behind.
And it's in Cairo that Charles receives the tidbit from James. Charlotte is a lesbian. Vi had seen her kissing a woman.
Charles seizes this leverage. He flies back to London and issues an ultimatum.
He confronts Charlotte, threatening to expose her sexuality in the London Times if she doesn't grant the divorce. Given the time period, that exposure would ruin her. She concedes immediately.
Finally free. Audrey and Charles work together in North Africa for General Wavell, conducting their first joint spy mission.
This is the ultimate merger of her moral courage and his exploratory skills. Their mission was to travel to Tripoli, which was held by Axis forces, under false pretenses to identify the new German general.
A high-stakes, extremely dangerous, covert operation.
They walk into the bar, casually mingling among German and Italian officers. They successfully identified General Rommel, the Desert Fox.
Charles, who knew how to read men, immediately saw the intelligence in his eyes and his warm smile. Audrey takes the essential photographs. They get the data back to General Wavell.
Audrey, the former COO of a San Francisco mansion, is now an active war correspondent and a spy.
But the war extracts a price again. Charles is wounded by shrapnel near Tobruk and is forced to return home.
But 1941 brings dual miracles. Charles returns to Audrey, who joyfully reveals she is nearly 3 months pregnant. She playfully announces that Molly needs a brother.
Their son, James Edward Anthony Charles Parker Scott, is born, and only moments later their dear friend James Hawthorne, who had been presumed MIA, returns home, having lost an arm in Provence.
A day of profound collective joy and reunion, cementing their unconventional family unit forged by love and global chaos.
Looking back, Audrey's trajectory is just astounding. She moved from the rigidity of 1930s San Francisco duty, running a house defined by pink satin, to a life defined by moral courage, saving orphans, and professional passion, photographing the desert fox.
She fulfilled her duty to her family until it became clear that her sacrifice was actively harming her sister and that her grandfather was safe. Only then, after exhausting the conventional definitions of obligation, did she choose the wild that her father had known.
A life found by embracing the world's dangers alongside Charles.
Her life story really proves that her ultimate philosophy mirrors Charles's initial warning. Life is short and infinitely precious. She repeatedly chooses presence over propriety and moral action over social safety.
And even after all the drama, the pattern of separation and that magnetic reunion just persists. In 1942, Charles is assigned to Operation Torch in Casablanca.
And after months of longing, Audrey leaves Molly and baby Edward in England and follows him again, registering as a photojournalist. She simply cannot bear to be separated.
She walks into the bar at his hotel, and she finds him waiting. She doesn't need to speak a word. She just runs a finger gently down the side of his neck.
The ultimate intimate confirmation of their bond across continents, across dangers, and across conventions.
Charles raises his glass, sealing their destiny with this beautiful, defining toast. To the wanderlust that brought you back to me, and hopefully always will.
It's a powerful image of lasting love found through immense personal cost.
But it leaves us with one provocative thought to mull over until our next deep dive. Audrey spent nearly a decade rigidly defining her duty to her grandfather, her sister, and the orphans. Given the ultimate tragic price paid by some of those she tried to help, like Ling Wei and Carl Rosen, was her eventual choice of self and love a necessary ultimate fulfillment of her own life's destiny?
Or does the loss of others suggest there was a degree of selfishness in finally choosing her own happiness? Something to consider as you reflect on the price of freedom.